Everybody. Uh, Chiefs jersey on Super Bowl Sunday, and I was like, absolutely. But you're lucky. You should be all grateful to Hannah because if it were up to me, I would have been up here preaching in my lucky robe, and none of you wanted to see that. But I will have it on later. Today is an exciting day for lots of reasons for me, for the Chiefs. I'm excited to see what happens, but I'm really even more excited about the opportunities that God has in store for us. Every Sunday when we get up here, we welcome people, tell them we're glad they're at the Crossings Church. And sometimes it's hard for me to articulate why I'm excited that people are here in a way that I feel like is effective. But the long and short of it is, the reason I'm excited that everyone's here, whether you be a member or a guest, is that I really do believe that God is doing some incredible things in and through the Crossings Church. And I believe that he's doing it because he's a powerful God and he has great things in store for our lives. But I also believe it because we're a church that really does believe in doing this together. When you look at the first century church and the impact that they had on the world, they had that kind of impact because they had God on their side, but also because everything they did, they understood the power of together. And as we started thinking as a church for the next year, we're like, man, this is a year where we're getting ready to plant another church. Our third church plant is going to go out in 2020. And we started thinking about all the things that come ahead of us, and there's a lot of challenges. There's some exciting things, some great things going on, but we're like, man, how is this going to happen? And we came to the conclusion that it's only going to happen if we do this together, if we do it together with the power of God and together as a church. And so our theme this year is together, and so we've kind of kicked off this year with this theme that says, look, we're going to talk for 4 weeks about what it means to do this together. Because we honestly do believe that, if you're going to have victory in your life, you're not going to accomplish that on your own. And there is power in doing things together as a team. One of the things I'm so excited about for watching the Super Bowl later is that we don't have one good player on the Chiefs. We don't have only 2 good players or 3. We have a team that is pretty incredible. And when you can have some teamwork, you can accomplish things that you never imagined possible before. And as you look at God's Word and as you look at the Bible, what you find out is you can see this all the way back, all the way into the Old Testament, the power of doing things together. If you look at the book of Exodus, some crazy and amazing things happen in the book of Exodus. God's people are there and they've been enslaved and they're being mistreated by the Egyptians. And God brings about great victory after great victory for them. And I think he does that for several reasons. When you look at the people of God, the Israelites, they're victorious together, but there were some things that they had to understand and that they needed in order to be victorious. And I think if we can look at them, then secondly, what we'll be able to do is look at ourselves and say, okay, what does that mean for my life? So when you look back at Israel in the Old Testament, what was it allowed them to be victorious together? Well, the first thing is this. They had the power of God on their side. It's one of those things where you guys have heard me tell stories before. I was that small, loudmouth kid in high school who probably wasn't able to defend myself, but luckily I had older, bigger, badder friends than me who would watch out for me and make sure that my smart mouth didn't get me in trouble. So I had some power behind me that I didn't have within myself. We're the same way. There are things that we are going to face that we need to understand without the power of God, we're not going to overcome. See, Moses understood this very same principle in Exodus 33, verse 15. They were getting ready to go into a battle, and Moses says to God, he says, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. And basically what Moses is doing, he's looking out at this battle that they're about to face, and he recognizes and he says to God, look, I can't handle this. We can't handle this as a people. We're not big enough. We're not bad enough. God, if you're not going with us, don't send us. And I know that in my life and in the lives of the members of the Crossings, and probably if you're visiting with us today, you're probably in that same position to where you look at your life and sometimes there are just insurmountable things that you see. There are things that you look at and you're like, man, I don't have any clue how I'm ever going to overcome this. How am I going to be able to deal with this issue, this problem that I'm facing in my life? And sometimes the answer is you're not going to be able to do that. See, we like to pump ourselves up and convince ourselves that we as humans are capable of doing anything and everything we want, but to be honest, that's just not the case. There are things that you are going to face in this life that without supernatural help, without God intervening, you will never really truly be able to overcome. And when we come to grips with that and we start looking to God for answers, that's whenever we start finding victory in our lives. And I say that from things that I've been through, things that our members have been through. There have been things that people in this church have overcome that they had tried so hard for so long to overcome, and they tried to do it on their own. Until they connected with the power of God, they never overcame some of the things that they were facing, the hurts, the struggles. For all of us, you look back on your life, for some of you, I don't know what those things are, but you've had those things to where you run into this wall, and you feel like you're just constantly running into obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And God wants you to know that he wants you to be victorious in those battles and to overcome those things, but you're not going to be able to do it on your own. And Moses and God's people, they recognized that. The second thing that Israel recognized that if they were going to be victorious together that they needed was this: they needed a leader from God. Sometimes we're not very good at being people who are followers. We tend to want to do our own thing. We live in a society that tells us to look out for ourselves, that if no one else is going to look out for you, and that you should be able to do everything on your own without anybody else intervening. But whenever it came to God's people and God always had a plan to help people. And his plan always involved not only his power, but other people. If you go into the Old Testament, you see very quickly God raises people up, and he says, listen, I've raised this person up to help lead my people, to help make sure that they're in the right direction, that they're going where they need to be. And all the way through the Old Testament and the New Testament, you see God using people to help lead other people. In Exodus chapter 3, I think it says 33 in your notes, it's Exodus 3, verse 4 and verse 9 and 10, this is where Moses first kind of encounters God. And it says, when the Lord saw that Moses was coming closer, he called to him from the middle of the burning bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he answered, yes, here I am. And God goes on to say, I have indeed heard the cry of my people, and I see how the Egyptians are oppressing them. Now I am sending you to the king of Egypt so that you can lead my people out of his country. You see, God knew that he had the power. If God wanted to, he could have just freed his people. He could have killed all the Egyptians from heaven, and it would have been said and done. But for whatever reason, God is always raising up people and placing them in our lives to be people who are going to help lead us. And I think it's because God understands not only do we need to connect with his power and connect with him, but we need a physical person in our lives that we can connect to and that we can follow. And so he comes to Moses, and Moses had problems and issues, just like every one of you do, just like every leader in God's kingdom has. They weren't perfect. He had doubts about himself. He was terrified, all these things. But God still says to Moses, no, I'm going to use you. You're going to go to the Pharaoh with my power, and we are going to set these people free, and you are going to lead them out. See, God has placed people in your life, and if you want to find victory, not only do you have to connect to God and to God's power, but you're going to have to learn to connect with other people who might be a little further ahead of you in the journey that you're going to be willing to follow, that you're going to be able to connect to in a powerful way. And so all of us should be looking for those people in your lives. And the third thing that the Israelites needed if they were going to be victorious together is they had to be a people who are willing to follow God. You see, God said, here's my power, it's there, I'm giving you people to connect to. But if they were unwilling to follow God, they were never going to find victory. And part of the problem with us today is that we people all over this country today are sitting in churches all over the place. And they want to be victorious with the things that they face in life. And they want to be victorious bad enough that they'll give up an hour and a half or so on a Sunday morning to go to church. But where they don't want it bad enough is they're not really willing to follow God. You see, God says, listen, I have the power and I have the people that I can connect you with to overcome these things. But ultimately, what it really comes down to is asking ourselves the question, am I willing to do the hard things and actually follow God and do what he says? You see, in Exodus 3, verse 18, it says this, my people will listen to what you say to them. So God is telling Moses, listen, my people are going to do what you say. They're going to hear you out. And then he says, then you must go with the leaders of Israel to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has revealed himself to us. Now allow us to travel 3 days into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord. You see, the people of Israel were going to have a choice. God says, I'm sending you with my power to Egypt, and I want you to lead out my people. But ultimately, those people were going to have to make a decision on whether or not they wanted to be victorious, on whether or not they wanted to be free. They were going to have to get in line and follow God and follow godly people in order to experience the victory in their lives that they were longing for. And you and I should be able to look at people like Israel. The Bible says that God has given us these people in the Bible for our learning. He says, listen, I place these people before you so that you're able to look at the really stupid and dumb things they did and not repeat their mistakes. And you should be able to look at them in the good decisions that they made, and you should imitate their faith so that way you avoid these these horrible things in your life. And so we should be able to look at the people of Israel and say, man, look at this. They had God's power. They had a godly leader that they were able to get behind and follow, and they made a decision to do so. See, if you come to church on a Sunday morning, you sit there and you leave and nothing ever changes in your life, you don't make a decision to follow God or to apply what you heard in His Word, you wasted your time at church. Whenever you sit down and you open the Bible and you read down through it and you see things that God is trying to teach you, but you refuse to actually act upon those and actually follow Him and do what He says, you wasted your time reading your Bible. Because the Bible was always designed to be that thing to where it points us towards God, but not only does it point you there, it calls you to action. And for too long, what Christians have done is they claim Christianity and they claim to be followers of Christ while stubbornly staying exactly where they are for their whole lives. And then we're confused as to why we don't find victory. Man, God, I'm so frustrated. I asked you to find victory. I know you have the power to do it. And God goes, yeah, and I put people in your life to help you with it, but you refuse to follow. You refuse to actually do what I say. How can I bring about victory when you refuse to follow me to the victory? And for all of us, we need to examine our lives and look at the Israelites and say, okay, what were the things that they did that led them to victory? What were the things that maybe halted victories for them at times? And say, I need to find some personal application in this, and I need to do something with it in my life. You see, to be a part of God's victory together, there are certain things that you and I must understand that the Israelites understood. And God is going to call you, and He wants you to find victory, but you've got to do some things. You see, the first thing to be a part of God's victory together, I must understand is this, that I will be called to battle. You are going to be called to fight. In Exodus chapter 17, there's actually a really cool story about God's people and what they're doing. They're getting ready to face a battle, and it's kind of a scary battle that they're getting ready to go into. And I want to read that to you. I want to read part of Exodus chapter 17 for you. If you want to open it up back there, John, we're going to start in Exodus 17, verse 8. Now listen to this story. It says this, Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, choose some men for us to go and fight with Amalek. And tomorrow, I'll stand on top of the hill with the shepherd's rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him. He fought with Amalek while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel would start winning the battle. And whenever Moses lowered his hand, Amalek would start winning. But Moses' hands grew tired, so they took a stone and they put it under Moses so he could sit down on it. And Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on each side of him, so that his hands remained steady until sunset. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his army with the sword. You see, it's a really cool story because what it's saying is they're coming against this great battle. And Moses looks at Joshua and he says, listen, you grab a sword and you go get in the fight. And sometimes in our lives, I think what happens is we've got these battles and we sit on our hands and God's going, you don't get it. You are in a fight. And just like Moses looks at Joshua in verse 9 and 10 and he says, Joshua, choose some men and go take the fight to the Amalekites. So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered. I think sometimes God's looking at us and He's saying, listen, you need to understand if you're going to face victory, that means you are going to have to fight. We are going to have to engage in battle. And I think that what Satan has done is he's done a really good job into lulling us into not realizing that there is a spiritual battle. There's a fight that's going on around us. And if you don't realize that you're in a battle, that you're in a war, you're not going to fight. You're not going to engage in that battle in a way that's going to bring about victory. And God's looking at us, He's like, for far too long, people who have claimed to be Christians, they've been sitting at church, but they've not been engaging in the battle. And all of us fight those things. We all have battles that are going on within us. For some of you, you look and that battle could be something, maybe you have something going on at work and it's very difficult and it's stressful and you're fighting and you're scrapping and you feel like you're constantly at war. And God's saying, listen, you got to take the fight and you can't just sit down and allow yourself to be destroyed. For others, you have battles that are going on. Maybe it's in your marriage. Maybe it's with your parenting. For others, you have battles that are going on from your past. Satan is attacking you, and he's taking that abuse that you suffered, whether it be physical, emotional, sexual abuse, and he's constantly beating you down with that. And he's telling you that you're never going to be good enough and that you're never going to accomplish anything, and he's holding you back with that. You have battles going on in your family. For others, you have addiction that has a hold of you that is keeping you from being able to be victorious in your life. and you're struggling with that addiction, whether it be to alcohol or drugs or pornography or whatever it might be, and he is constantly weighing you down and beating you down with that, and he's like, listen, you are involved in a war whether you realize it or not. And if you look at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10 through 12, this is what Paul tells the church in Ephesus. He says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. So he's getting ready to tell these people, you're in a fight, but you've got God's power with you. And then he says, put on the full armor of God so that you can take a stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities and the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And Paul is telling these people, there's a battle going on, even if you can't see it clearly. See, in our society, what we've done is we've kind of made a joke out of Satan, right? You know, you watch cartoons, and on one shoulder you've got the angel, and on the other shoulder you have the devil, right? And they're arguing back and forth about what you should do. And we all watch those things, and we laugh, and it's funny. And you watch shows like, you know, we watch TV shows sometimes where, you know, Satan's dressed up in the devil costume. And, you know, you can watch TV shows like Lucifer or The Good Place. And really, in some ways, what it does is it really trivializes the actual war and battle that's going on, the spiritual fight that's going around. And see, you may not be able to look, and we can't look with our eyes and see the spiritual battle that passage says is going on all around us, but you feel the effects of it. So while you may not be able to see the actual fight that's taking place in a sense, you definitely feel the effects of that war going on. And it shows up in the anxiety that we face, in the depression that we fight, and it shows up in the hurts from our past, and it shows up with Satan attacking us with family issues and problems. And I think about over the past year at our church, at some of the things that some of our families have been through, and the loss of loved ones that have taken place, and how Satan has tried to attack us with that, with abuse that's taken place in people's families, and all the hurts and all the things. And these things, they grab a hold of us, and they're constantly trying to destroy us. And I think sometimes what we do is we look at those things and we don't understand that that's a part of that spiritual battle. And whenever you don't understand the gravity of that and the weight of that, you don't grab a hold of that sword and say, all right, it's time to go do battle. But you need to understand that if you're going to find victory in your life, there are times that you're going to have to pick up a sword and say, I'm going to have to fight my way through this. And sometimes I think what we do is we just kind of kick our feet up and be like, I don't know, I'm just going to ride it out and see what happens. And God's going, no, that is not the way to handle this issue. You're involved in a spiritual battle, and it's time that you engage in it in a way that allows you to bring about victory in your life, because you're not going to overcome the addiction in your life if you're not willing to fight it. You're not going to overcome the hurts of your past unless you're willing to stand up and face them. You know, right now at the Crossings, we just launched a bunch of our Manasseh ministry classes. And those classes are basically designed to deal with hurts from our past, all kinds. You know, we've got Healing as a Choice, which is kind of like, in a sense, an umbrella thing. And it helps you deal with the hurts from your past, the things that you've been through. We got, Wounded Heart, which helps us deal with sexual abuse. We've got the Game Plan, which helps us deal with addiction. But unless you're willing to stand up and engage in that fight, you're never going to overcome those things, ever. And they will constantly knock you down, and you will constantly feel destroyed and defeated until you pick up a sword and say, you know what, it's time for me to engage in this battle. I'm going to go deal with the past hurts that I have in my life. I'm going to overcome the fact that I was used and abused and mistreated. I'm going to go and I'm going to deal with the addiction that I'm fighting. And you start really facing those things in your life, you are never going to find victory. And God wants you to understand that if you want to find victory, if we want to find victory as a church together, then we have to be willing to engage in a fight that sometimes it isn't really clear that you're in. And he says, listen, it's time for you to grab a hold of this and fight. The second thing that we have to realize is not only will I be called to battle, but at times I will also be called to be a visible presence. You know, when you think about the story, it's really, really cool. You read verses 9 through 11. It says, tomorrow, Moses says, I'm going to stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands. And he's like, I'm going to be up there and I'm going to be holding up this banner, this staff of God. And he says, so that Joshua and the Amalekites, as they're fighting, I'm going to be up there on top of the hill with Aaron and Hur. So you get this picture that there's this fight going on in the valley, right? And there, you can just, picture those movies. I for some reason, I always picture 300 type style battles, like when I think about the Bible. But they're in this valley fighting. But up on the top of the hill is Moses with these two men with him. And he says, I'm going to be up there and I'm going to be holding this staff of God up. I'm going to be the thing that rallies you. And it says, as long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But when he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. In my head, I love war movies and things like that. And there's almost every war movie I've ever seen almost. There's that scene to where the battle, it's not looking so good for the good guys, right? And things are bad, and the guys are looking around, and they're like, we are about to lose this battle. Something bad is about to happen. But then what happens is, somebody will pick up that flag, right? And they pick it up, and they hoist it up, and they start running across the field. And all these guys who were feeling so defeated in that moment, who looked and they're like, man, there's no way that I can overcome this battle that's taking place in my life right now. What am I going to do? And this guy picks up the flag and starts running. And you see all the people in the movie and all the people that are out on the battlefield, they start looking at that dude. And they're like, what's he doing? That dude's nuts. Wait a minute. We can do this. Let's go. And they rally around and they run and they fight behind him, right? And it's such a powerful scene in those movies to see that person who's holding up that banner that's like, listen, God can do this. He's got the power to do it. We can do this if we fight together. We can fight together and overcome this, and we can find victory in our lives. A few weeks ago, the Chiefs were getting the mess kicked out of them in that game, right? It was 24-0. And I'm sitting there watching it, and it's 24-0, and I put on my lucky robe. I'm like, we're going to win this game, right? And then it clips to the sidelines, and I'm not sure if it was my robe or Patrick Mahomes that motivated them, but, you see him on the sidelines. He's like, and he is all over his team. He's like, this is not over. He's like, listen, one play at a time. You find one special thing and you make it happen. And sure enough, they scored 51 points in 40 minutes of football, which has never, ever happened ever. And it's because someone grabbed a hold of it and realized, I need to be the visible presence that everyone else is able to look at, that people could look and be like, hey, if that dude can do it with God, I can do it with God. And I need to be that person. And you see, that works for different people in our lives. We've all been called to be that, but the first thing is I need to understand I will be called to be an example to other believers. See, if you're a member at the Crossing Church here, you need to understand that you have a responsibility to every other member at this church. You have a responsibility to all of the believers in the world that you are going to be someone who is going to stand up and be a visible presence for them. Hebrews 13:7 says, don't forget the example of your spiritual leaders who have spoken God's messages to you. Take a look at how their lives ended and then follow their walk of faith. Another version says to watch your leaders and consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. And so for me, what I get is I get this picture of these people, and what the author of Hebrews is saying, he's saying, look, you got to look at godly men and women in your life who have had victories before. Look at the way they lived their life, at how faithful they were, and how different their lives were. And he's trying to paint a contrast. What he's saying is you should be able to look at godly men and women and see a difference in their lives and the lives of people in the world. For me, growing up, I was a PK. So anytime you tell someone you're a preacher's kid, everybody's like, oh, you're one of those kids, right? Because preacher's kids, rightfully so in a lot of ways, have terrible reputations. Most of my friends who I knew who were preacher's kids were hellions. They were bad, rebellious kids. And what I've never understood about that is I looked at it when I was younger, and I was like, why is that the case? Why do we have this reputation? And then I start talking to these PKs, these other kids who are like me, and what you start finding out is like, yeah, the reason I live that way is because I look at my dad, and he says one thing up here, and he looks like he puts on this life, but whenever we're at home, he's a totally different person. And there was so much hypocrisy. And they took that example and that responsibility extremely seriously. And see, they weren't the only ones in my church who did that, though. You see, I don't think that I grew up from the time I was like this tall until I started doing campus ministry myself. I grew up around college ministry. What are you laughing at, how tall I am? Yeah, until I was this tall, and then I shrunk back down to here. But y'all are, my wife and daughter think they're hilarious over there. But anyway, I grew up watching this, and here's the thing that impacted me as much as my parents in some ways. I had other men and women who were ahead of me in the journey at my church who I was watching. And I don't think they had any idea how closely I was watching their lives, but I would watch people like Danny and Darnell and Renee and Colleen and all these people and Jean who are older than me when I was a little kid. And what I would do is I would watch the way that they were living, and I would see the impact they were having on their campus. And I was like, I want to be like those people. And because of them, it built my faith, and it helped me understand, man, if you have the power of God in your life and you're doing life together with God's people, he does some really awesome things through you. And I wanted to do that, but here's the thing. Every single one of us here in the church, if you're a member at the Crossings Church, you need to understand that you have a responsibility to your brothers and sisters to hold that banner high. You have a responsibility to the people in your small group. They should be able to look at your life and they should be able to say, man, look how they're holding the banner of God up. That's someone who I want to be like. I see the difference he's making in our lives, and we should take that role and the responsibility very seriously. You see, because the people in your small group, they can look at you, and that can lead them either to a path of defeat or a path to victory. They can look at your life, and you are either going to encourage them to follow Christ and to do what he says and to be connected to God's people in a way that brings about incredible victory, or they're going to look at your life and they're going to follow you down a path that's dangerous, and it's going to damage their relationship with God, damage other people, and end in defeat. You have a responsibility, those people. You have a responsibility, older people in our congregation. We have a responsibility to the kids who are right above us right now in those classrooms. They should be able to look to you and I as an example. We should be setting an example for them that says, man, a life with God and following him and connecting to his power and connecting to his people is the only way to live life, because you will end in victory. You have a responsibility to our junior high students who sit here, over here on this side. You have a responsibility to our high school students, to our college students. We have a responsibility in leading them to where they should look at us and be like, man, if I could only be like that person. And that doesn't exempt the junior hires and the high schoolers and the college kids. You have that same responsibility to everybody that's coming up behind you. And you also have that responsibility for men and women who walk in this door and see you. It's encouraging for an older man or woman to look and see a kid be serious about their faith. Man, you want to talk about getting a swift kick in your butt? Nothing will do that than seeing somebody who's 15, 20 years younger than you who has taken their faith more seriously than you are. And you're like, man, I better get it together. You see, we have a responsibility to one another. I have to be an example to the other believers. Philippians 3:17, Paul tells this church in Philippi, he says, join together in imitating me, brothers, and pay close attention to those who live by the example we have set for you. He's saying, listen, we were designed to follow one another. We were designed, Paul in the scripture says, follow me as I follow Christ. What he's saying is that I'm a little further ahead of you on this walk. Get behind me and follow me, and you'll be happy with the way that your life turns out if you do so. For so many people, we get frustrated because life isn't looking the way that we want it to, but we're unwilling to follow God and follow the people that he's put in our lives, and God's going, hey, you're missing the boat, not because you can't be victorious. You're not being defeated because you're incapable of doing this. You're unwilling. You're unwilling. We have all been given a responsibility to be a visible presence for our brothers and sisters, to other believers. Secondly, I need to be an example to non-believers. 1 Peter 2:12 says, live decent lives among unbelievers. Then, although they ridicule you as if you were doing wrong while they are watching you do good things, they will praise God on the day that he comes to help you. You see, we need to be a stark contrast to the world in the way that we live. But a lot of times I think what happens is that people claim Christianity, they claim to be like Christ, and then they go into their workplace and they go into their schools and their classrooms, and what they do is they live a completely different life than what they say they believe. And the world looks at us and they can't stand us, and they can't stand the church because they look and they're like, you're just a bunch of hypocrites. You're full of it. That's what they think. And what he's telling us in this passage, he says, listen, you should live a life that is so different that you are a shining example. You're someone who can be looked to for something different. We are supposed to be the hope and the light of the world. You see, for a lot of our members here, you know what it's like to live in the dark. You know what it's like to be dealing with the things that the world has to deal with, and you've been there yourself. And at some point, somebody was a light for you that showed you a difference. And you were able to look at their lives and be like, hey, man, that person's not that different from me. If they can have that, maybe I can. And because of that example, because they were so different than the world, you were drawn to Christ because of that. And it's time that as Christians, we understand not only am I a visible presence to my brothers and sisters in Christ, and not only am I responsible to them, but I am responsible for making sure that the world who is hurting and broken and they're helpless and harassed, as Jesus would say, I need to understand that I have a responsibility and a debt that I have to pay to those people. And so when you go to work and when you go to class and you interact with your family who don't know God, you are supposed to show them something different. You're supposed to live a life among them that says, listen, we are so much different than anything else you're ever going to find in this world. See, if we're going to find victory, we're going to find it together by making sure that we're willing to engage in the battle and that we're willing to be a visible presence, not only to the believers and unbelievers. In John 13, 34 and 35, it says this. It says, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another, and by this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. This is not what Christians and churches are known for. We're not known for being very loving sometimes. We're not known for being very loving to the world, but we're also not known for being real loving to each other, because what happens in most churches in this country, the majority is you come to church, you sit down, you hear a lesson, you sing some songs, and then you leave and you have no further connection with anybody in that church outside of that assembly. And that does not show the world love. What other relationship do we have that we would claim as loving when we have a surface interaction with someone every once in a while, but there's no depth and there's no real deep, intimate connection with anybody else? See, as Christians, we're called to engage in each other's lives in a way that it shows other people that we actually love and care for people, and that involves relationship outside of us sitting right here. And if we want to have the kind of impact on the world that we claim we want to have as a church, we have to understand that I need to be a visible presence that shows the world something completely different. See, if I want to be a part of God's victory together, I must understand I'm going to be called to battle at times. I'm going to be called to be a visible presence at times, and also that I'm going to be called to support others. In Exodus 17:12, it says, when Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur held up his hands on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until sunset. You see, what Moses understood is that he wasn't going to be able to do this on his own, and he needed the support of other people. There are things in your life that you are never going to be able to do without other people coming alongside you and raising up your hands. One of my favorite artists is Andrew Peterson, and he has this song called Hold Up My Arms, and he actually wrote it to his wife when he was going through a very difficult time, and he was saying, listen, I need you to be that person in my life, just like Aaron and Hur were for Moses, to where you can hold my arms up steady. He has another song where he's talking about he was going through a really dark time in his life, and he was struggling with depression. He was just struggling with all these things, and he says as he's singing on the stage, he just barely can get the song out because his heart is so broken. And he says the one thing that got him through it is looking at his brothers on his side who tour with him, who love him desperately, who love God, and they were there right there with him in the fight, helping him overcome those things. All of us need the support of other people. And for that reason, I actually, I want to ask Lindsay to pull on up here. I asked Lindsay to talk to you guys today because I think Lindsay is an awesome example of exactly what we're talking about. And I've kind of asked her to share her story and where she's at. I had the privilege of meeting Lindsay years ago at Lindenwood, and she'll tell you, but we didn't start off maybe to the greatest start on earth. But I love Lindsay to death, and I think she is, again, she's one of those people who you look at, who we should be able to look at and be like, this is a person who I can look to and see God working in their lives and bringing about victory in their lives. And I gave her several weeks to prepare for this. I called her at 9 o'clock last night. I'm surprised she said yes. She tried to run me over when she got here. But we have a fun relationship. But I'm going to turn over to Lindsay for a minute. So let's give Lindsay a hand, and she's going to talk with us for a minute.
What? Thanks. No pressure. Hi, I'm Lindsay. So I have been a member of the Crossings for about 10 years now. And like Carrie said, I met him through the college. And for whatever reason, I decided to choose a college that was about 200 years old and probably the most inaccessible in Missouri. So that was my first battle. I would call Carrie almost on a daily basis to tell him, hey, the elevator is broken, somebody is parked on top of the ramp, somebody is something. So that's how I kind of started coming around and started coming to cross chat, different things like that, just more and more. And then they asked me to come to my first retreat, and I said no. I actually called the place. It was some cabins down in Tennessee in the mountains, and the only thing that I knew was that it was inaccessible. And when you have a disability that everything that they describe to you when you're at the doctor is followed by the word severe, that's a really, really terrifying thing to know that you are going to go in the middle of nowhere to these mountains and not be able to get around. And but Carrie told me, well, we happen to like you. And yes, first off, I think that was the first non-sarcastic thing Carrie ever said to me, so I didn't trust it quite at first. But the more I thought about it, the more I decided to, maybe this will be the moment that I let my guard down. So I went, and by the end of that first week, we were backpacking through the hills. And by backpacking, I mean I was holding on to someone's back, yes. I could feel every time they slipped. It was terrifying. We've actually have a backpack now that is a whole lot safer than the first time that we went. So that's been better. But more than anything, I learned to let people carry me spiritually and emotionally. I can tell you it was a lot less scary to be pulled up a mountain on somebody's back than it ever was to cry in front of anybody. Pretty positive that the first time anyone here saw me cry is probably written date, time, because they didn't know I could do it. And they were just really excited to see that happen for me. But through that, I've learned that I can trust people. I can trust those people to hold me, to lift me up, to hold my arms up. And in return, I've been able to do the same thing to other people. I have a very obvious, visible disability. And you can't be invisible when you have a 400-pound chair, no matter how much you want to be. And several years ago, I don't think I ever would have gotten up here and said this to everybody and allowed you to even, you're all staring at me. And that's what I put, that's something that I go through every single day. But now that I'm here, now that I see things and realize, well, they are looking at me. I'm a visible presence, but I'm a visible presence for God. And they can see me and they can look at my life, and I can be that same spiritual and emotional support that I was given when I first started my journey here. And I think about the ministries that I'm involved in. I do greeting, I do children's, just started with worship. Those are all very visible ministries. And the people see me. And it's something that I have had to deal with questions, with staring, all of that. But if just one person comes through that door and is put at ease by me, then that's a win. Coming to this church, I didn't want to be kind of the poster child for disabilities, and I'm not. I'm a full active member, and I've really been able to see such a huge turnaround in my life. And the people here, I promise you, are the same. So thank you.
I couldn't convince her to try to go down the steps. She didn't want to do that. So with Lindsay is a really cool thing because I really have seen Lindsay just change so much. She talks about being a visible presence, and she's right. She can't hide, in a sense. when you walk in, every Sunday morning, I know when I come in the doors, Lindsay's going to be over there greeting. She's going to hand me a bulletin. I'm going to tell her, try not to run over the children. You know, it's going to be a great interaction, and she's going to be smiling, and we have a lot of fun together. And but what's more cool than that is just seeing the change that's come about. And I really do think, you know, when Lindsay first came around, Lindsay was not known for being the nicest person at Lindenwood during that time. I'll tell you that. But, you know, as our friendship grew and as I saw her connecting with other people, it was cool. It was neat to see, for one, Lindsay being able to be vulnerable enough to say, okay, you know, you're going to stuff me basically in a backpack and carry me around the mountains. That's something difficult and vulnerable to have to do, right? But like Lindsay said, she opened up her heart much more than that to be able to share her story and to say things that were scary about the way she's felt and what she's been through, and to see her. Just to see her heart change and to become someone who is not the person who's being given to all the time. She gives so much to other people. And to see her use that sassiness in a good way. Like, Lindsay is, you know, when you're the campus minister, sometimes people are afraid to say things to you, and sometimes it's probably because I can be prideful. People don't want to say things to me. But Lindsay is not that person. Lindsay has handed my rear to me on more than one occasion, and I appreciate her deeply because of it. And I love her tremendously because I've seen what God has done in her life and the victories that he's brought about because of the decision that she made. She was going to connect to the power of God, connect to God's people, and that she was going to be a follower. And she understands now that she's going to have times where she's going to be called to battle. She is going to be a visible presence to other people. And she understands that she needs support and she needs to give support. And while Lindsay's battle that she faces is a visible one, the rest of us, that's not always the case. Right? It's for us sometimes that we want to hide the battles that are going on in our lives. We don't want to talk about the fact that we're dealing with these things. And so they're easier to sweep under the rug and hide and then not ever have to deal with those things. But what God wants us to understand is that without the support of other people, and when we hide those things and we're unwilling to be honest about the things that we struggle with and put those things out there, we don't get the kind of help we need. You see, we're called to support each other in a lot of ways. One of those ways, and we're going to talk about 3, and there's many more, but the first way is we're called to support each other emotionally. Galatians 6:2 says, carry each other's burdens, and this way you fulfill the law of Christ. You see, the burdens that we're facing sometimes are not visible burdens. With Lindsay, when you're backpacking around the mountain and she's on your back, or you're carrying her across somewhere, or you're picking her chair up off the ice so that she doesn't slide down the hill at Lindenwood, that's visible. But the hurt that went on underneath that, and the doubts and insecurities and fears that she faced are much like what you and I often like to hide. You know, the things that we struggle with, those hurts from your past, not everyone can see those. You have to be willing to bear those if you're going to have emotional support. We're called to be there for one another when we're going through those times. One of the things that I love about this church is when you see someone dealing with something difficult, people rally around them and they gather around and they love them and they long to see them overcome that. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to bring about that emotional support in their lives to give them what they need. And that's shown up in so many ways. You know, sometimes something will happen and somebody will put on the membership wall, hey, so-and-so's going through this. Let's do what we can to help them. And to see the love and outpouring that takes place. In the campus ministry, we have a social media wall where we've become more dependent upon prayer in the campus ministry, I think, in the past few months in a really cool way. But people will get on there and they'll say, hey, I'm going through this. I really need some people to pray for me. But you don't only see people saying, I'll pray for you. You see people saying, I'm praying for you, and asking how they're doing and following it up and getting together with people and trying to support them. That's what God designed the church to look like, to do life together, to carry each other's burdens. You were not designed to be able to carry everything that you're going to face on your little shoulders. Even though you think you are, you were never designed to have to do it all on your own. Another way that we're called to support each other is through spiritual support. Galatians 6:9 and 10, Paul writes to the church and he says, don't allow yourselves to be weary or disheartened in planting good seeds. For the season of reaping, the wonderful harvest you planted is coming. Take advantage of every opportunity to be a blessing to others, especially to your brothers and sisters in the family of faith. Sometimes spiritually we go through things and they are just disheartening. And it's very easy to become those people who we're like, man, I'm wore out, I'm depressed, I'm tired, I'm frustrated, I'm angry. And God looks and he says, listen, don't allow that to happen to one another. Engage with each other because you've been doing the good work that God wants you to do, and eventually it's going to pay off. But in those times while you're waiting for the harvest to come in, you need brothers and sisters to come around you to put their arm around you, to lift you up, to hold your hands up and say, we're going to get through this together, even though you're struggling right now. And to see people go through that, it is going to happen, guys. Many times in my own life, I've been in that position, and I've watched other members in our church to where they're struggling spiritually, but because they have brothers and sisters who love them, who are willing to come alongside them and say, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you get out of this rut that you're facing, that's an incredibly good place to be. And I think the reason that God's church is that way is because we don't have a God who asks us to do something that he's unwilling to do. You see, whenever it comes to our lives and God is telling you, hey, you need to be there to carry each other's burdens, you need to help each other emotionally, you need to help each other spiritually, you're talking about a God who at one time looked down on this earth and it was so broken and so messed up and so screwed up and people were going through so much stuff. Jesus looked down and was like, something has to be done about what's taking place down there. And what he did was he said, I'm going to be that person who's going to be that visible person. I'm going to come and I'm going to stand there and I'm going to support and I'm going to look out and I'm going to cover their sins and I'm going to cover all the stuff in their life because I love them deeply enough to do that. See, Jesus didn't have to come down from heaven where he had it all perfect. He did it because of relationship and love, and he wanted to be together with us forever. And what he understood is that our sins kept that from happening. So he said, I'm going to come down there and I'm going to die for these people's screw-ups, for all the junk that they've done. And then I'm going to call them to lay down their lives for each other the same way that I did. That's why every Sunday at the Crossings Church, we take the Lord's Supper. We take communion together, whether it be here in this big group or if it's in our small groups. We take it every week because we need to be reminded that we have a God who is willing to support us, who is willing to come here and be that shining example for us, to cover all of our sins, to lay down his life after living a perfect life to take care of our sins. And so right now what we're going to do is we're going to take the Lord's Supper, but as you take that bread, which represents Jesus' body that was broken, and as you take that cup, which represents his blood that was spilled, what I want you to really be thinking about is the fact that, man, Jesus did this for me, and I need to remember that not just so I have this sentimental thought of happiness in my head about what he did, but he did it because he wanted it to be a motivation for me to do that same thing for other people. He wanted it to be that thing that shoved us forward that says, I'm going to do what he did for me, for my brothers and sisters, and for the people who are in this world who are lost and don't know God. I want to be what he was for them. Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you again, God, for just loving us when we don't deserve it. God, we are a messed up people who make bad decisions. We hurt ourselves. We hurt others. But still, you look down on us, God, and you say you have the power to help us overcome those things. And you put people in our lives to help us overcome those, God. And help us to be people who are willing to follow you. God, that we can engage in this battle, that we can be willing to be a visible presence like your son was for us, God. And that we'll be able to support each other in every area of and aspect of our lives, God. Help us to think about that as we take the bread and the cup. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
He came to live a perfect life. He came to be the living word of life. He came to die so we'd be reconciled. He came to rise to show his power and might. That's why we praise him. That's why we sing. That's why we offer him our everything. That's why we bow down and worship this King. 'Cause he gave his everything. 'Cause he gave his everything. He came to live again in us. He came to be a conquering King and friend. He came to heal and show the lost ones his love. He came to go prepare a place for us. That's why we praise him. That's why we sing. That's why we offer him our everything. That's why we bow down and worship this King. 'Cause he gave his everything. 'Cause he gave his everything.
So, like I said, I think it's one of those things to where we're incredibly fortunate that we have a God who, again, asks us to do exactly what he did. He doesn't ask us to do anything he was unwilling to do. None of us like the boss who asks you to do the things that they're unwilling to do, right? Everybody complains about those bosses. You go to work and he asks you to do something, you're like, yeah, he would never do that. But when it comes to God and it comes to Jesus, they look and they say, listen, all I'm asking you to do is exactly what I've already done for you and for everybody else. And he calls us to be people who are going to engage in the battle, to be a visible presence, both to our brothers and sisters in Christ, to the lost, and also to support one another emotionally, spiritually, and also sometimes financially. There are times, I look at our people in our church members, there are times people go through difficult times. There are times that people in the world are going through a difficult time, and they need support, and they need help. And there are times where God calls us and says, listen, you need to be willing to give up some of what you have for other people. In Luke 6:38, it says this, give and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more and more, running over and poured into your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount you get back. If you're at the crossings very long, you can look around. We don't have a lot of fancy stuff because we don't ever want to be that church. We don't want to be the church where you pull in, you're like, wow, this place is just so nice. Because we don't want to invest in those types of things. See, when people give at the crossings, what we want to invest in is in people's lives. You see, what's much more impressive to me than going to a church building that has the newest, latest gear and has the nicest place and all the pretty stuff, what impresses me much more about a church is when you go and you see people whose lives were once broken and torn apart and falling down, and you find ministries that help minister to those people. When you go to a church and they have a ministry for people who have been sexually abused and helping them overcome that, when you have healing as a choice classes, when you have things to help people overcome addiction like the game plan and helping overcome the addiction to pornography, when you go to a church and you see things like the New Heights ministry that take kids from rougher areas and they give them some tutoring and some mentoring and some big brothers and big sisters who can teach them, they can break the cycles that they've lived under for generations and have something so much better and something so much more. What is impressive when you see ministries that are focused on students, when most student churches can't get students to come in the doors at all, you find churches that have lots of students because they're finding out that God actually does work and he actually does have power. Those are the things that we as a church want to invest in. I think about over the years, every year we plant a church, not every year we plant a church, but every year we do plant a church, we have a special contribution for that church that's going out. And in a few months, we're going to be doing that again for the Columbia church plant that's going out. And, people at this church, you guys are awesome. You are generous. You scrimp and you save because what you want to see is you want to see places like Collinsville and the Inner Belt and Columbia. You want to see people's lives touched and changed. So you will scrimp and you will save and you will give generously because you want to see God work. You believe in what God's kingdom is trying to do. And that's such a powerful thing. And I can't think of a time, we just got back from a campus ministry retreat a few weeks ago. And when we went to this retreat, we took our college ministry from here, but then our two church plants also brought their college ministries. And we all took group photos. And when I saw those group photos of our group, and then underneath it, I posted it on Facebook, then underneath it, there was the Inner Belt's campus ministry, and under that was Collinsville's campus ministry. I've never looked at those photos, and I've never looked at those people and been more happy that I gave in the special contributions than those, because those are lives that are being changed and being touched. And God has this way of whenever we're generous with each other or generous with people who are in need of giving us back so much more than we could ever imagine. How many of you guys have participated in one of those special contributions for the church plant that's went out? Raise your hand real quick. I would be willing to bet if we were to sit there and ask you if you've ever regretted that, giving to that after you've seen what God is doing on those church plants, the answer would be no. Because God has a way of giving back something we don't understand. You see, one of the things that we do at the crossings every Sunday, you're going to hear this every week if you come here. We say this time and time again. If you're visiting with us today, when that basket gets passed by, we don't want you to put any money in that basket at all. And the reason that we say that is because, first of all, if you're not a member here, then we don't believe it's really your responsibility, first of all. But second of all, so many churches out there are out to get people's money. And we want you to know when you come here, we don't want you to put your money in as that basket goes by. If you're visiting with us, just let it go by. And the only thing we ask you to put in there is that card that's in your bulletin that says the Crossings communication card. We ask our members and our guests to fill that out because what we understand is that what's important about that basket going by isn't the money that's getting put in, it's people's lives being changed. That's what matters. And there are things on there for some of you, look and you're like, man, I'd love to engage in the battle, but I don't even know what that means. I don't know what it means to be connected to God's power. When you fill out that communication card, that's your chance to say, hey, I like a personal Bible study because I need to understand what it means to be connected to God, what it means to be a part of his family and do this together. For others, you've been coming around for a long time and you've just never jumped in. You need to check, I need to join a small group because I need to get connected on an intimate level. I don't want to be someone who just comes here on Sundays. I want to do life together with people because that's where you find value and meaning, and that's where you find power and victory. And then for others, some of you need to say, man, I've been a part of a small group for a long time, but I'm not a visible presence, at least not a good one. For some of you, you're a visible presence, but it's in a very negative way, to where everybody in your group looks at you, and it's sad, but they look and they're like, man, if that person could just get it together, and rather than raising the group up, it's being drugged down. And you need to say, hey, God, it's time for me to change that. I need to be a positive influence on the group that I'm a part of, on the church that I'm a part of, to where people can look at me and long to have what I have. See, I don't know what you need to put when you fill that out today, but I know all of us have decisions to make, myself included, that allow us to become more of God, what God wants for his kingdom, more of what he wants me to be for his family. And I really do believe that when we do these things together, that God does great things. You see, the final thing we need to understand is whatever we are called to do together, God brings about victory. Exodus 17, verse 15 and 16 says this, Moses built an altar and called, "The Lord is my banner." He said, because hands were lifted up against the throne of the Lord will be a war against the Amalekites from generation to generation. See, whenever we work together, he says, I'm building this altar, and it says, the Lord is my banner, and you get that picture again of him holding up God, and he says, listen, we won this battle because we had the power of God, and we had people who were willing to engage in the battle, and they were willing to support each other in that, and that's why we won. And every time that you do that, you connect with the power of God. You're willing to follow, you're willing to engage, you're willing to support other people, and you're willing to be someone who's an example. God will bring about victory in your life every single time. So when you fill out that card during this first song that's being sung, keep that in mind, that God wants to bring about victory. But the question you need to ask filling out that card is, what's that going to take from me? He's going to supply what he needs on his end, but what's he going to need from me in order to do that? And then during the second song, the baskets will be passed for our members. We need your card and your contribution. For our guests, don't put any money in there. Just allow your card to go in there and allow God a chance to change and bless your life. And let's just see what he does with us together over the next year. It's going to be an exciting year. It's going to be an exciting day when the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, right? Look in your bulletin, find that address. You can go watch it with a bunch of people. It's going to be an awesome time. But let's pray together. Father in heaven, thank you so much for loving us, for bringing us together with you and with your people, God. I pray that it will make a vast difference in our lives. When we connect to your power, we connect to your people. We're willing to be an example, God, and we're willing to submit ourselves to you and support each other, God. Incredibly good things happen. Thanks so much for everything you do, God. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.